Welcome to a New Paradigm of Education podcast. I'm your host, Monique along with Carrie Jeroslow. A new paradigm of education is not about just sitting in front of a classroom and educating children in the old paradigm style. A new paradigm is about collaboration with a range of educators, parents, mentors, business owners, whoever wants to be a part of creating the next generation of change makers. That's what I classify as a new paradigm of education, as well as an energetic shift within the world. And as we know it, one of those bypasses is the pandemic. Not that this podcast is about the pandemic, but it's just showing us a three-dimensional aspect of what a new paradigm can look like. And what comes from that is beauty, grace, and manifestation. So here we are with beautiful Jennifer Bracey, who's an educator, a parent from the United States. She works with children and families with healing using the TBE method, which means transforming experience-based brain and somatic work. So it's really beautiful to have you here with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
Yeah. Would you like to just share a bit about yourself? You can just talk about your educational background or your children or whatever you want to share. Just introduce yourself a little.
Sure. Well, my degree is in education, the traditional way of educating. And I popped into the school system and thought that I would follow the rules, but I didn't really follow the rules most of the time when I was in the classroom. And then I transitioned to educating in a church setting, so in a religious setting. And that's where part of what started stirring for me was the depth of our children and the need for being intergenerational with our connections. And so from there, I actually went to seminary, but then have been doing trauma work with children and families for years now. And that seems to be a place where I enjoy being in that journey with people as they go through that healing process. And when you think about children that have been through trauma and parents that have lived in trauma and then going to school to try to learn, it's just really hard. And so what I hope to do is to work with those families to help them understand how to holistically take care of their children. And then I also like to work with the educators. I do a lot of observations in classrooms and don't always interact with the kids as much as just observing what's going on in the classroom to help the teacher better understand what's going on and what to do to support that child in a different way.
Yeah, that's massive work that you're doing for the children and also for the educators. I think it's so important, like even myself as an educator, to be able to be mindful of what I'm doing in a classroom or even in my own home as a parent, because I feel like the children naturally are going to be vibrating that from us anyway. And I'd like to go, a little bit more into that with you. So what brought you into this type of work? Exactly, how did it come about? And do you want to share what it means as well, this transforming experience-based brain for our guests? Because we probably don't know what that means at the moment.
Good. That's fine. I actually started doing my trauma training with the Trauma Institute and did somatic work. And so the somatic healing is all about how our body reacts to traumas and how we hold those traumas in our body and how, because we hold that trauma in our body, we're affected. It causes illness medically, physically, emotionally, all those kinds of things that happen because we're holding on to those traumas. And so for years I did somatic work, but what I realized with children was that they really needed a way to understand how to have the words to say what's going on with them. They didn't always, just because they can say they're mad or they can have a fit, they don't have a word to talk through that so that I can know in a sensing way how to get to that with them, right? So I wanted to go into their autonomic nervous system, to their heart rate, to their kidneys, to all those functionings that happen all the time. I wanted to go into that and slow that down and to help them settle. And so what I realized was they did not have an understanding of how to do that unless I brought in the sensory system. So hearing, tasting, touching, all of those kinds of things I brought in and used in parallel with my somatic work to help children titrate to settle. But a lot of times what I find is when I was doing the somatic work in particular with the sensory work is that I needed to teach them how to settle and ground before I could teach them anything else. You're going to have your fit and you can be angry. You're going to feel sad and you get to feel sad. But before I can really work through how that feels, or so-and-so did something to you and you're exploding because of that, I first have to teach them how to settle and to ground, to connect to the universe in a way that there's that grounding piece that gets them in a connected way to even pay attention to their bodies, right? So I've done that work for years and years. And just in the last year and a half, 2 years, I think, I started doing my training with TEB. And transformational informative brain work really is about, there's touch work involved in it, but it doesn't have to be. I actually took my training online. And so it is an intuitive kind of, I'm touching your shoulder and your hip, and I'm opening up your heart, and I'm opening up your lungs, and I'm co-regulating with them, either on the computer or if they're on the table. And so what I'm doing there is I'm working with the brain to take care of pre-verbal developmental wounds. And so what I'm finding is my somatic work needed to be undergirded with a sensory piece for our kids. But now what I'm realizing is, even as infants and in the womb, there's lots of things that happen, and not all of it is always good. And then we bring all of that stuff in to the world. And how do we do it? Well, we don't know how to do it because we didn't have words. And so they don't have to have words. I just work with them energetically through their body, using the brain. I tell the kids we're creating new train tracks in their brain. That's what we're doing. Your train doesn't go this far. We want it to go over here. And so that's what I tell them that we do. And so I do touch work with that, to work through that with them. It's amazing work. It's fun. It's amazing to watch the children settle, just like I had to do with the SE and the sensory work. I spent a lot of time on our initial protocol and just getting them to land. Some of my children do not even land on the table. And so I need to teach them how to even land on the table before I can do anything else to slip into their little nervous systems. So
yeah. So Jennifer has been working with my kids, specifically my oldest, since he was 4, I think. She had this amazing camp on her property called Journey Camp, and it was a sensory somatic camp, but it was all, the look of it was all fun, right? The kids just had so much fun. They were gardening and getting into the dirt, and she has a labyrinth on her property. So, she was teaching mindfulness through walking the labyrinth and painting and, all these different things, which was really helpful for Elijah, because he was so out there. He did not know how to be in his body at all. And so, although I wanted him to stay up in that airy fairy place, because I think there's beauty in that, he also needed to know how to be in a body. And so Jennifer's work with that was transformational, really, because he's at such a great place now at 12, where he really, really struggled for a while. So that's how I met Jennifer. We met at, I remember we met at the Arts Council. So it was like when I first moved to this little town, and I just knew I had to connect with you.
Yeah, exactly. The camp was really fun because I used that sensory input out in nature. Like, the kids knew to bring their galoshes and bring their raincoats and to change of clothes, because we were not going inside, hot, cold, or indifferent. The only reason we went inside if it stormed. And so they were always outside. And towards right before COVID, the last camp that we had, the children, I did not structure their days at all. And it was very interesting that the first day they didn't know what to do. They would follow us around, me and the counselors. They had no idea what to do because somebody had always told them what to do. If after you do this, do that, right? And so I wouldn't tell them what to do. And so it took them till about Wednesday to realize that they could go anywhere on the property as long as somebody knew where they were, and they could do whatever they wanted to. But everything was set up in a way, like Carrie was saying, that I was getting into their nervous system. And then we would come and have a meditation time or a settling time. And then I would raise their nervous systems up and settle them so that they would be aware of what that feels like. Because we all know that our nervous system on a daily basis goes up and down and up and down. We just don't need to be too far up or too far down. And so I tried in a day to bring it up and bring it down and bring it up and bring it down so that they felt that to be normal and okay and safe. And so we would do that. Yeah. I'll share an activity that we did. Unless you have something else you want to ask, I was going to share it.
No, I'd love to hear it. I was just going to reflect back and just say it's amazing work that you're doing, and even what you were sharing about the nervous system, because we always focus so much on settling. So I really like this process where you're also bringing in the awareness of the unsettlement, if you want to call it that, because I think for children, because that's kind of the normalized state, the traumatized state is this feeling of being unsettled, and the trauma sits there and that feels normal, right? So then for them to come out of feeling normal, then to go back into that and then to create a new normal, I think that's amazing work. And I don't think that many people I know are doing that. I think it's really unique in that way. I haven't come across that before. So that's amazing.
Well, it's interesting in that I had a young child that was at Journey Camp, and Carrie will know some of the activities we did were very tactile and sticky and messy, whether it was paper mache or working with sand or dirt or whatever. And the children would come to me and say, I need to go wash my hands. And I would say, no, you need to stay right there and finish this little bit. And then you can go wash your hands, and then you can come back. So I was even titrating into their nervous system with things like that. And it's interesting that I have one of those children now that's getting ready to go into middle school. And I could remind her of that activity and paralleled it with what I'm doing now with her and saying, I'm going to go in and it's not going to be comfortable, but then we're going to come back and you're going to be okay. And so it was interesting that I was able to use that to help her understand, oh, that's what that feels like, but then I'm okay. And so, and I'll tell you, the activated system, the traumatized system that stays activated instead of shut down, is almost easier to work with.
Mm.
I'm coming across a lot of kids now that their systems are shut down, and bringing that up into normal is very difficult, much harder than bringing it down.
Yes.
So that quiet child that's not causing any disruption is dealing with as much as the one that's on high alert. They're just on high alert and hunkered down, right? I got to stay safe and be quiet. Where the other one's gone, I can't be safe. I'm not safe. I got to be loud. Somebody's got to save me, right? And so I am seeing children that are very shut down.
Yeah.
So do you think it's the trauma that's shutting them down?
I got to feel safe.
That's their trauma response.
That's their trauma response. That's their defense mechanism. And it's just interesting that I'm seeing more of it. Is it because of what's been going on in the last several years? I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's just very aware of, I know when I work with adults, and I have some adults that were very cognitive bound. And so I'd have to take them I'd have to get them into their bodies in a different way. But I had some that were shut down, but right now I'm just a lot of kids that are shut down. It's very interesting.
I think maybe it's like being a good child, like being a quiet child. Oh, they're so quiet. Yeah. They're a good child, and that goes back to the old paradigm of education where the teacher sits out the front of the room and says, be quiet, you're always giving time as a teacher to that disruptive, noisy child. Not that I don't want to classify children in that way. I don't mean to say it in that way, but they're always the ones that you're like, all the energy's going there. And then it's like, but what about all the others in the room that are also equal and all deserve the energy as well? So it's a really good point that you've raised. It's very, very necessary to also look out for the quiet children and just to see how they are and to check in with them. So again, your work is really powerful, what you're doing. I'm so impressed. Yeah.
I want to share about an activity. I've learned to give myself much more permission to talk more about screen time than I did even 4 or 5 years ago. I was probably one of the people, especially in our community, that was very strong, opinionated about the screen time. And we didn't need to do that. We needed to monitor it, all that kind of stuff. And now than they have been. But one of the things that we do at camp is at the lower end of my house and on the property is what we call Compass Cove. And there's hammocks and a wobble board that's kind of a balancing thing and stumble stumps, but it's a grassy area and a fire pit. And so I lay a canvas out and I get the children to lay on their back and just to be still. And if they're really still and pay attention, the butterflies come into the canopy where the trees are. And it was very eye-opening for me to realize that the children could not find the butterflies because they did not have peripheral vision.
Oh.
So it wasn't a matter of they couldn't be still. It was a matter of if it didn't come right where they were looking, they did not notice anything other than that. And I couldn't figure it out for a while. And then I realized it's because of this. They're right on the screen. They're right looking at the screen. And so when you think about safety and awareness of others, and you don't have any other vision but this, that doesn't feel too safe. And so there's just so many things that really are affected by the fact that our kids are using electronics and being on the screen much more than they should be, even in school. I had an educator to tell me just this evening that she was told that they need to take this test on their computer. Why do they need a paper test? Why can you just not use their computer and take it on their laptop? And she's one that doesn't open the laptop very much at all anyway, unless she has to, right? The school computers or whatever. So, so as an educator, she was told, this is an imperative test that they must take. We have spent a lot of money to take this test, but we don't have enough money for you to make copies of it. We want you just to take it on the computer. And so, we're losing an awareness even in our schools. While we think that them getting a computer is the grandest thing ever, I'm looking at y'all, I'm not touching y'all, I can't smell y'all, I can't really have an awareness of y'all unless I'm really quiet and pay attention, and really you're smart enough to intuitively get that, right? But we're doing that to our children in the classroom.
Right. God, this is such an interesting topic. I mean, we've had so much conversation, about this, Jennifer and I, and there's like the screen time thing is always a challenge as a parent. And the thing is that there needs to be some kind of system, I think, to balance everything. It just feels like it's out of balance because the technology is not going away. In fact, I think they're like born into this time. And I really feel like there's a part of their DNA that just is like programmed to understand it way easier and faster than I ever can. But there does need to be what's happening is like so far out of balance, that it's like they're missing the connection, right? Just like the person to person connection and the sensory, what you're talking about, those sensory somatic,
what do you think they're touching, right? What are they touching?
Right.
Not mud, not dirt, not a crayon, not a pencil.
Right. So there's got to be like more of that to balance the stuff that they're doing. And, I just wonder how it all works together, but I struggle with it myself. So, but that about me, just only because of, we're all super busy and I'm doing, my best to get them as much attention. And I'm thankful they go to a really good school where they're outside a lot, but just like that's an internal struggle that I have as a parent for sure.
Well, Carrie, I've said this for years and years, is that I recognize, even when I was saying years ago, be careful with your screen time, I recognize that parenting is just difficult in general. I have a almost 30-year-old and it's not easy, right? At any age. But what I say when I work with children that are really struggling, whether, I will say to the parents, it's not that your child is bad or doesn't need to be doing the electronics or anything like that. It's a balance, just like you're saying. And so it's not that the world is bad and what we have now for our children is bad. It's a matter of we have to do things to counteract that.
Right.
And so I would send children home with different exercises to do because we just got to bring that balance in. When I was growing up, and I don't need to share how old I am, but when I was growing up, I was outside all the time. I didn't have the if we watched television, it was on Saturday night, and it was with the family. It was never in an isolated room or anything like that.
Right.
There's intergenerational conversations going on. I was at my grandparents all the time. And so my daughter didn't have all of that either. And so we have to do things differently, not because it's bad, but because it's different. And I think that it's up to all of us and you guys that have written this book to make that awareness out there and, and to figure out how to get our education system to hear, we're not saying it's bad. We just say we got to do it differently. We got to do this differently. And what does that look like? And for us to be heard, I mean, we're teaching social, emotional, and meditation in the schools, but it's really checking off a box, guys, in a lot of places. We're just checking off a box. We're not doing it deeply.
Yeah.
Because we got to take to give.
Yeah, I agree with you about that. It's an embodiment that needs to happen. And like no need to segregate the subjects anymore, just like an embodiment of the work itself. You become the mindfulness, and then that, like whatever you're learning is incorporated in that as well. And I also think what you were sharing around the technology, that the mindfulness counteracts that, and it also helps both with learning difficulties as well. And it also helps to open up your frontal lobes again, which I'm sure, like I notice myself when I'm on a cell phone, I can feel it closes. So I can imagine it's not helping the, I don't know the names of the brain, but the frontal lobe there. And I can see that is also counterbalancing that as well. So that's amazing. I'm curious about this labyrinth, because that to me is like super new paradigm. And I love this kind of idea. Like it's like a fantasy for me, like to have classrooms or schools or even non-classrooms, like places like yours, like facilities, learning facilities, like whatever you want to call it, like with the labyrinth. Can you tell me like about that? That's super exciting.
So I had a gentleman from in the mountains. So the labyrinth landed because of my spiritual background. And it was just, I knew that I had a place for it and I knew I wanted to offer that on my property. And it just really was amazing to watch the children do it. But a gentleman from the mountains I had rocks brought in from a local river. So it's all very connected to the land. And so he created the labyrinth on my property. And we would walk the labyrinth at least once a day. And, I would let the children experiment with it, being curious and that kind of thing. And then every day at camp, there was something else different that when they went into the labyrinth, they were processing. And then we would all get to the center and share and interact with each other. And then we would let go of, if it was something we needed to let go of, we would let go of it as we left. Right. And so the children loved the labyrinth. That was the way we ended our day. And it was never, oh, do I have to do that? They were ready to do it. It was, you got to pack up, let's go. We're going to the labyrinth. And rarely was there not enough time to do the labyrinth the right way. It was amazing to watch those children take that pathway and interact with the rocks or the leaves, or to pick up the petals or the acorns or stones or whatever. It's amazing. Their bodies were drawn to it in a way that people would say, those children are not going to do that. I never had a child that didn't want to do it. Never.
I love it. amazing. It's healing and it's powerful, and they're learning so much, and they're learning different things every moment. Like I can't even say what they're learning. It's not even up to me to say what they're learning, right? I love it so much. I want to build a labyrinth where I am.
Wind chimes, and we had wind chimes hanging around and just all kinds of different things. It was, it's a great place. It's a great place.
And I also wanted to ask you about the work you do with, you said you help parents and educators as well. Like what do you do with them? Because we've spoken a lot about the children. What do you do with the adults?
So I have been into several schools. Lots of times what happens is I have a child that is really struggling, and the struggle is obviously in school also. And so they get to the point where, can you just come talk to the teacher? And so lots of times I'll just open up and share and do like a little mini workshop in the schools. And so I show the teachers how to have weighted blankets, how to have lap buddies, how to bring in different things to settle the children, have a quiet area, how to set up the room in different ways for them to calm down. Or like the school where Carrie's kids go, they actually have a room where they have different things to do and that kind of thing. So I go into the schools and just show them different ways. I use you just had it right before we started.
Oh, yeah, TBE, you mean?
No, essential oils. So I'll show them how to do that, have that going on. Yeah, sorry. Have that going on in the classroom. Just all kinds of things like that. Showing them how they need to sit on, some children really need to sit on like a cushion that has a bit of texture to it so they can actually feel their butt in the chair. Or do they have to sit? Can they, sit on the ball or those kinds of things? So that's what I do with the educators. And then as I was sharing earlier, I often just go and observe. And so I help teachers to understand how when children come in the morning, how does that feel in their nervous system? Is it highly activating for some children? How can you do the entering into and leaving? And how do you do that so that it helps their nervous system to be a little more settled so that they can sit down and do their work when they have to? So I do a lot of observation. And then sometimes I'll just look and observe one child. Like there's one child that the teacher is really struggling with. And so they won't even know I'm in the room, and I'll just watch all the different things. And the teacher has so much that's going on. He or she may not have seen all of that. Right. And so I can say, this is where I'm seeing them very activated. This is where they could have some help settling and those kinds of things. So I help them with that.
Wow, that's amazing. It's amazing that they have that support as well. And I have seen that in some schools that I've been in where they offer different textures and bowls and like bean bags and things, not in all the schools, but I'm really grateful that I have been in some of those schools, and it's been really necessary because those schools in particular had a lot of children that really needed that type of learning. They weren't just the ones that would just want to sit. Not that any child just wants to sit, right? But it was necessary. So again, very powerful work. Did you want to say something, Carrie? Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say, okay, what did you call it? Sock buddy? Is that what you called it?
Lap buddy.
Jennifer? Yeah. Okay. So I love these things, and my kids made them at camp. And so what it is, what you take a sock, and what did you put in it, Jennifer? Because it's such an easy thing. Rice.
Oh.
Rice. Okay. So, and you tie it, right? And kids get like kind of, all over the place, and they just need to settle. They sit down and they put it in their lap. And it's just like, it just is such an instant thing. My kids loved it. And it's so simple to make, and it really settled them. It just kind of, I don't know, you can say technically what it did, but my kids loved that sock buddy.
It's awareness of your body. Like if they're so far, like he was out of his body all the time, wherever you're going to put that, on your shoulders, on your lap, wherever you're going to, on your feet, wherever it is, it's like, oh, I can take a breath. My body's here. Oh, I can settle a little bit. Some teachers, the teacher I was talking to earlier, she actually had weighted pillows made for all of her students.
Wow.
And so they can have them anytime during the day. It's not, oh, it's time to do meditation or quiet time, anything like that. You can go and get your lap buddy or your pillow anytime. And the other thing about that I kind of went off a little bit more than some people might say is, some people say that you only need X of weight compared to the weight of the child, like the weighted blankets and stuff. I didn't do that. I was very intentional at camp to let them go ahead and start doing their rice, filling their socks. It's like an athletic tube sock, so it can be long. And then I would go to each individual child before they tied their sock up, and I would make sure that they have the weight that they wanted, not what somebody said they needed, but it's what they knew they could do, because some children can't stand as much as others can, and others need a lot. And so I let each child make that decision. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that, Carrie, because when she said it, I thought, oh, maybe I should know what that is, but I didn't realize that's what it was. I was just imagining these soft blankets, because then she said blankets, and I was like, oh, the blankets, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But I like this weight. Like, the weight is kind of the calming aspect, is it, just to hold them down, like almost like this, you know, when you sleep and you have all the blankets, is it that kind of calming effect? Is that the idea?
It's exactly that. It's exactly that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I'll say one other really cool thing, although my kids they would get actually mad at me when I told them to use it, but this is when they're on their screen, right? She made these this is like just 2 pieces of wood
tea stools
for the kids to sit on while they're, just to activate their core and to keep them aware of their body, to sit on it while they're on their screen. My kids would fight me every time I would say, "Hey, get on your." I know.
Wow.
Yeah, if you're going to be on the screen, you got to be on your tea stool.
That's brilliant. That's so brilliant. Yeah. And do you do like healing as well on the parents, like this type of healing practice as well? Or is it mostly you're just educating them on the environment and all of these amazing tools that you've just shared as well? Like, do you teach them mindfulness or healing?
It's very interesting. When I started working with children, and my daughter had trauma. And so a lot of times the trauma therapist would ask what's going on at home. And I just didn't really make the connection until I started working with children on my own. And it was like, okay, if the nervous service system at home is on high alert, then the child's going to be on high alert. We co-regulate, right? So whatever's going on at home is going to be what's going on. And so when the child is struggling in school or struggling at home with behaviors or learning or homework or whatever, then you know that the parent is highly activated. Well, that child's going to meet that. And so I do a lot of educating with the parents to help them understand, if this is where you are, then this is what you need to do to shift it. Right? That's just part of what we have to own as a parent. So I got to do this so that the child can, that immature nervous system can get to where it needs to be. So I end up spending as much time with the parents as I do the children. I am one of those who, if I have an active client, I am pretty much on call 24/7 and will answer phone calls and text at any time, basically to support the parents, because I figure at that time when that system is trying to heal, that's exactly when everybody needs the support. And so I make sure that I'm available to help them understand, what do I do now? This is what's going on. I don't know how to settle myself. And so I give them tools in their own toolbox for that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's so important and so necessary. And probably a missing piece for some people. They don't realize that because they're so focused on the child and not themselves. So it's really good to hear that again. Definitely.
Well, it goes for the educator also.
Yes, I know myself. I shared in my story about that, my own journey as well, like around that process of, just like the way I would enter a classroom really would change how the child would react to me. Like when I was first learning and I was nervous, the children would just feel that and they'd just be like jumping around, having a great time. And I'd just be like, oh, like this little, didn't know what to do, like wondering what to do. And anyway, that was like, when you're first learning to teach. But then obviously later on, the more I practiced mindfulness, like the children were just like super calm, super happy, and just totally mirroring what I was creating and what they were creating, because they were giving me the joy as well. So it was like this kind of mutual co-creation that we had happening. So yeah, it's amazing. I ask all of the guests that join us what they believe is a new paradigm of education or a vision for the new paradigm. Do you have one that you'd like to share with us around that?
I think what the wish or the desire is to get our children outside more. And I really am struggling with, in the United States, I'm really struggling with the state and regulations, and then it trickling down to our local school systems in a way that's just only teaching the what needs to be learned for a test. And we've said this for years and years and years, but when you tell a teacher how to structure her day to teach what needs to be taught, there just is not an allowance for a teacher to be real with our children. And so I haven't been in the classroom except to observe in years and years and years, but I can't imagine being told what I'm supposed to teach at what time every day. That disregards the child in the classroom and what's going on that day for those children as a group. And so if anything, I would like for there to be a little bit less of control in the classrooms and the teachers to be able to teach what they know and how they know how to teach. The teachers know how to do this. They just need to be allowed to do this. They need to be back. People need to back off.
Yeah, I think it just takes a stand of all teachers just making that stand as well. Like, I think it's really powerful what you've shared, and just taking a stand in the day to make space for that. And what's going to happen? You're going to end up with happy children. You're going to end up with like children that want to learn. You're going to end up with like results, and then maybe they'll be like, oh, okay, fine. Like it'll prove itself rather than as these like little box structures. And I know there's this pressure and all of this stuff. When you were sharing everything that you shared in the beginning about your beautiful environment and everything you do, that for me is a new paradigm. I'm like, bring all of that into schools. Let's set labyrinths up in the ovals. Let's bring in the crystals. Let's bring in the healers. That's what I was sharing at the start. It's like my vision is all of us. Like everybody has a gift, and the children each have a gift. And if we are all using our gifts and our talents, it's like total abundance for everybody and joy. And I just imagine it to be so beautiful, this place of learning. So it's really powerful what you're sharing with us.
It's we know so many children now that the parents are homeschooling and are unschooling and doing all those kinds of things. And it's a reaction to what's happening in our public schools. And it doesn't have to be this way, right? It can be like you're describing, right? But it's being brave enough to do that in the classroom within the system. I just am one to buck a system all the time. And so I was told I had to use the spelling books, that the children had to be issued a spelling book. Well, I teach spelling. I just don't teach it out of that book. I teach other ways of doing that. And so I assigned the spelling books to everybody. And then we stuck them in the desk, and we turned the desk around, and we never opened the spelling books, but I issued spelling books. But not everybody is comfortable doing that in the system. So I hope for our teachers to be more empowered to do what they know is the right thing for the children.
Yeah, I think the teachers have it in them, like the spelling, what you're saying. I used to do the same, just play games all day. And I'm like, well, if they can then show me that they know this word somehow, then that's it. Exactly. Tick. If we have to still give ticks, I hate this tick system thing, but yeah, totally. I hear you on that. And it's going to be changing. As you said, I think this is what's beautiful about what is happening with the world, that people are looking for other ways where, people are homeschooling and unschooling. And I love it. I love that there's going to be this creative flow, and the schools will also be, I think, reflecting that as well.
I think so. I hope so. I hope that is a beautiful ripple effect of what happens, right? Is what I hope. Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us and connecting with us today. Did you want to share anything before we left, either of you? Any more words to say?
I'm just so thankful for Jennifer. Jennifer is, Jennifer, and then the school that the kids go to is really, ahead of its time, and hopefully will be the norm. And, I live in a really small town. Like, I remember when you started your camp, right? And I was just amazed that in this small little town, that you had such a progressive camp. I always said that it was the camp that I would design if ever I was designing a camp or wanted to design a camp. It really just had all of those aspects to it. And so I just want to express my gratitude for you, Jennifer, and just your place in my children's life, but also in just the bigger movement towards supporting our children and the creative beings that they are. There's so much potential for what they can do in the world if they are given the freedom to be themselves and not be pushed into a mold. So I'm just thankful for you, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm thankful for all of y'all, and thank y'all for giving me the time to share. My heart is totally for children, and absolutely they have to get their education, but there's so many other ways to do it than what we've been seeing. So I'm ready for this shift.
Awesome. And we'll put all your website or something to promote you also in the notes as well, because your work is really powerful. Maybe some people want to reach you online for some help with something. I know you've got some amazing things to share. I've just learned so much myself in this time that we've been together. So it's really powerful. Okay, so thank you everybody for tuning in today to a New Paradigm of Education podcast. And I will sign off with Mahatma Gandhi's quote of "Be the change that you wish to see in this world." So namaste, everybody.